All right, YouTube. In the good old days, the establishment, when it looked down its nose at people, its very, very large nose, let's just leave it at that, typically did mince its words and try to insinuate that the masses were ignorant without actually stating it outright. That's no longer apparently the case. We got a piece from foreignpolicy.com here on the Brexit and how it's time for the elites to rise up and defeat the ignorant masses. I would like to state first and foremost that the elite is taken from the same population as those same masses. They are just as ignorant. Anyone in D.C., any banker, any corporatist, they're all just as ignorant as that redneck down the road smoking meth. They're exactly the same in that respect. That's number one. Number two, the people calling for such a system most often do not rise to the height within academia or within their professional career or how much money or influence they have to actually be part of such a meritocratic system were it implemented in the first place. It's very funny. It's almost suicidal when they suggest such a thing. The third thing is that the fringe ideologies, so-called, actually being endorsed by people as a solution to the problem of the stagnation of centrism within the Western world, they're not that fringe of ideologies. Nobody has taken up the swastika and marched through the streets with clubs proclaiming that there will be a new Reich. Nobody's waving the hammer and sickle around and calling for the abolition of the state and saying, now we will implement Marxism. Or only very few people are doing these things. They're tiny minorities of the population. The far left has endorsed, essentially, a mediocre, watered-down version of socialism, which is virtually indistinguishable from progressivism. While it would be a mistake to implement such a system, it is not particularly a fringe ideology. It's fairly close to the interventionism of the centrists within the Democratic and Republican parties, or within parties in Britain like the so-called Conservatives or so-called Labour, the Conservatives being no longer a Conservative party and the Labour Party, of course, abandoning its own workers that voted for it. Another side of it has embraced a type of populism that's a throwback to the 50s and 60s and 70s. It's not really a throwback to some antiquated time period. It's not that out of the way. It's not that out of the norm. And in many ways, socially speaking, it's not even as fixated on moral issues as it was before. You would look at Trump's sort of ideology, or the ideologies of somebody like Nigel Farage. None of these people are saying gas the gays, beat women in the streets, we will have, rule by Christ or something like that. And then the third ideology, which is rising up especially in the Americas and not just here in the U.S., is libertarianism, which is quite literally the opposite of fascism. You couldn't get a more anti-fascist ideologies. When these people from Antifa, these anarchists and communists, rail against the far right, what they don't understand is that essentially their beef is with government. They just don't realize it. They think they're revolutionary, but they're a far cry from the hippies and counterculture of the past. They're a far cry from the anarcho-punks of the 70s or something like that. And they're really just a bunch of trust fund babies for the most part. These ideologies are not really that fringe. They're not that scary. The only people scared by them are people that are easily made nervous by any form of change. In a way, you might liken them to last generation severe moralists who in turn, when metal was invented, or when rock and roll first emerged, or when women started wearing pants or something like that, they cried foul and they said that it was the end times because they weren't used to this brand of change. If you're going to have a meritocratic society at all, it'd best be a libertarian meritocracy, because otherwise you will undergo a revolution. Then you either do what Maduro is doing now and start shooting people, or you're going to have a fucking problem and your head will probably be hung off of a pike. So yeah, the bank heads and corporatists and bureaucrats and politicians and judges and so forth are no longer apparently even pretending that they really care about the public good or about any individual who doesn't donate to them, which shouldn't surprise us. It's not some hidden arcane secret knowledge that these people think this way. But you do have to realize they are in fact outnumbered by 99% of the population, which isn't going to stand for such things. There are better things that some idiot journalists could be doing than advocating the overthrow of representative democracy and just ignoring what people say. Say, oh, fuck this. It's, we need a new world order, essentially. The fact that somebody's calling for that and they're doing it unironically is pretty funny to me. That's about all. Peace out.